Hi, I'm Steve Nathans Kelly, editor, streaming media producer. Recently, I had the chance to speak with Doug McKendrick, production manager at Toronto's world famous Roy Thompson Hall, main performance venue for the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, about his team's recent acquisition and implementation of state of the art 4K video production, recording, and streaming gear, largely from Blackmagic Design. Like virtually all performance venues in North America and throughout the world over the last 10 months, Roy Thompson Hall has seen its entire slate of events canceled or postponed as a result of pandemic restrictions, and has made a necessary pivot to audience-less performances streamed online. Doug is also involved with an epic restoration project years in the making at Massey Hall, Canada's most venerable theater, legendary for Neil Young live at Massey Hall and other classic shows. Like Roy Thompson Hall, Massey will be fully video production ready when it returns as part of a multi-venue performance and recording complex when it reopens hopefully later this year. We discussed their transition from their old ad hoc workflow for concert recordings, how the pandemic has accelerated some plans and slowed down others, and what it's like working with a large symphony orchestra in a mostly empty hall under mandated social distancing requirements, and what lies ahead for both venues. What were you doing with video before? So like where did you start before this transition happened?
Well, before the pandemic, we did put in a broadcast sort of streaming studio, and it was sort of a lucky thing where we had gotten to put in maybe about 8 months before we closed for sort of pandemic reasons. But prior to installing that, we did a lot of work, a lot of corporate work where people would come in and stream things, and they'd bring in some cameras. And the Toronto Symphony, who is part of our part of the venue, they're a tenant, but they're sort of our main tenant. They had done a lot of work with streaming or not necessarily live streaming, more recording and playing later, and had used a similar approach to what we ended up putting in, which was sort of installing a number of sort of fixed cameras throughout the place and just switching between them. But yeah, I mean, before we installed everything, it was just bring things in, use them once, and send them out for the most part. And it was really expensive to do, and it wasn't done that often.
So you didn't have an installed in place setup?
No, I mean, we had years years ago. There's this thing in Canada called the Canadian CBC, Canadian Broadcast Corporation, our sort of national radio, and they had an audio recording control room that was put into the place when it was built, and inside that room there was an old Studer audio console and some analog gear, and it is actually wired to the CBC broadcast across the street where the CBC main building is, and they used to broadcast the orchestra from Roy Thompson Hall a long time ago, but that had sort of fallen off, and the room was just sort of sitting there with the console in it. And so we ended up actually taking all that equipment out and sending it back to CBC to give us space to put in what we did.
Was the pandemic the impetus for making a change, or were you thinking about overhauling your video setup before that?
No, I mean, to me, in a lot of respects, the pandemic, from this sort of streaming concert perspective, has gotten us to where I thought that we might be in 5 years. And this was with the renovation that we're doing at Massey Hall. Video and audio recording is a large part of the plan and always has been. And so we were, looking at doing that as part of the renovation, and we were, investing a lot into it. And, we didn't have it built into our workflow. And so we were looking at opening this new facility or renovated facility with all these new capabilities, and without really the sort of know-how within our organization on how to utilize it. So we took an opportunity that we had, prior to the pandemic, with some funding that came available, to put it into Roy Thompson Hall, to give it a dry run for a couple of years and see how we could fit it into our workflow, what equipment worked, what approach worked, what we needed from a crew perspective, and sort of like a lower risk experiment. And it just so happened that not long after we got it up and running, the pandemic happened, and it became our only actual source of anything.
So what have you been doing with streaming?
So we've been doing a number of things. We haven't done a lot, if any, really through our own box office. Some of them have been artists that have come in and then they've gone and done the sort of ticketed streaming portion on their own. We aren't really doing a lot of live streaming per se. Most of what's happening is we're recording it and editing it in post and then putting it up as a sort of a premiere or whatever. The Toronto Symphony Orchestra, if you were to look on their website, has an on-demand series that they've built, which has been stuff that they've shot using our facility. And we are currently in the process of putting together our own sort of on-demand platform, which would be a live streaming or on-demand subscription or single per pay-per-view service. And so we're amassing content right now to launch that in the near future, but we need to sort of get a critical mass of content before we launch something.
I think the first concert I saw during the pandemic was the Dropkick Murphys at Fenway Park, right? And so that's like 4 or 5 guys all over the infield, so it was weird seeing them all spaced out like that, but I mean, you could see it was easy to distance the band because it's a small band. So with an orchestra, are they being arranged in smaller ensembles, or how do they do these, performances in the pandemic?
Well, I mean, so we have to work within the provincial guidelines of the province of Ontario where we are, and also within the city. So, I mean, that dictates at the moment, we're only allowed to have 10 people on stage, and that's a recent thing. Before that, there wasn't necessarily a limit, but they had to be adequately spaced, and there had to be, impermeable barrier between anyone who sings or plays woodwinds, brass, or whatever. So we would space everybody out 2 meters apart. People who could wore masks, and those who couldn't were surrounded by plexiglass, which is a little awkward, but when you're shooting it, it's actually not that bad, and it's the safest way to do it. And we've done a lot of work with our air handling to bring in a lot of fresh air while this goes on.
And so have you got actual camera ops shooting? Are you using PTZ, robotic cameras?
We have 7 PTZs that we own, and we've sort of got 2 different approaches that we use, depending on what it is. We can do it all PTZ, and really, at the beginning of the pandemic, when things first started happening again, we were doing it with absolutely the only people in the room were the performer, and everyone was separated. All the operators were in separate rooms, and no contact with each other, and it worked out really well. We have added on some occasions operators, and that's worked out really well. The PTZ cameras are great, but they are what they are. And if you want to add a little bit of sort of artistic flair to it, the PTZs aren't really the instrument for that. So we have as many as 3 or 4 operators on occasion, depending on what's being shot. Certainly with some of the larger symphony stuff, it's needed.
Okay, and as far as the switching and streaming, or the switching and recording workflow, so what are you using for that, and how are you crewing that? How does that play out?
So typically, if we are just recording to, if we are not providing a line cut or streaming out, then typically it's only one video person, and that person operates the cameras. We don't really get into switching. We just go right to ISO recorders, and we have a director that sits in a separate room that has the multi-view and calls the cameras. usually we're able to set up, you know, a lot of presets and sort of just sort of bang between them, and then, you know, move a little bit here and there. And then we have a lighting operator who is in the room with the director. And so rather than looking at the stage, they're actually operating looking at a screen, because there's no audience. It doesn't really matter what it looks like in person. And we found that to be a really effective way to just save time and have communication, you know, instantly sort of between the director and the lighting person. And then we have a on-site person who does audio monitors for the bands, and that's wedges or in-ears. And then we have a separate recording engineer who multi-tracks the audio and provides a sort of a rough live mix that can be used to edit later, or if it is going out, could be the mix that actually goes out to air. Okay. And so, you know, so typically our crew is about 5, which is, you know, for a 7 or 8 camera shoot, not that many people.
So what was the process of choosing the gear? Why did you go with the Blackmagic?
In terms of functionality and price, you can't really beat it. You know, I mean, there's obviously cheaper stuff out there, and there's obviously much more expensive stuff out there. But Blackmagic really, I mean, they've got a good line, a complete line from sort of start to finish, and functionally simple to use, you know, easy to get, you know, and we've been happy with it. You know, and we looked at sort of all ranges of it, but it really seemed to sort of fit the mold. And we've outfitted, we have a sort of a live production video side. So, you know, in terms of when we actually do normal events, we do a lot of video support, whether that be projection, you know, that sort of thing. And we bought a very similar system to take care of that switching. So it provides some redundancy too between the two. So, I mean, if one switcher goes down, we have the same switcher on stage that we have in the broadcast booth. So we, you know, we've got some redundancy that we can swap things out, and that seemed to make a lot of sense as well.
Okay, so you were doing like IMAG before then. You were.
Oh yeah, that we were doing a lot of that. I mean, we have 5 projectors in house, and, you know, front, rear, kind of whatever you want, and some, you know, sizable 25K, you know, Christie HD laser projectors. So we did a lot of that before, but now not as much.
Sure. So, I mean, I assume at least first 5-6 months of 2021 are canceled as far as live in-person performances. So, you know, in terms of your video programming, what are the next 6 months look like for you?
We're ramping up a lot. It's taken us a little while. Honestly, things changed so much that you know, you would get one thing kind of going and planned, and the rules would change, and we'd have to sort of throw it in the garbage and start over again. So I feel like it's stable enough. It looks like we're, you know, barring another, you know, complete lockdown, we'll be shooting, you know, between 10 and 15 separate artists in January and into a little bit of February, and then a little bit beyond that. The orchestra is also looking to, the Toronto Symphony Orchestra is also looking to get a little bit more going on into sort of the, you know, February, March. And, you know, we're just keeping to work on that sort of thing and develop it further.
And so you think mostly you'll be doing, you know, edited productions that premiere or streaming? Yeah,
there's a little bit. I mean, we're getting more into the sort of streaming world now in the next couple months, where, you know, probably not live streaming until we get into audiences, because there's kind of not a, I mean, people have different thoughts on it, but, you know, it's a risk that maybe isn't necessary if there's not an audience, and you can put out a more refined product. I know that there's, you know, thoughts on whether the experience is the same if it's not live or not, but, you know, I think that we can put out a more refined product. if it's not streamed. When we get into live audiences, I think that there will be certainly a period of time where there'll be a blended component of in-person and digital. And really, that's kind of what I thought the whole thing was headed toward anyway. So, I think that we'll have some time to explore that. A long
Yeah,
time
it's interesting.
to explore that.
We've been seeing people doing different things. The question of whether to stream it live, I think, can have a lot to do with how much interactivity you have in mind. We've seen people who are kind of zooming the audience into the venue so the performers can see them. But if you're not doing that, why not edit, deliver something beautiful?
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, and the technical sophistication that people are doing with these sort of interactive live things are really incredible and admirable. And it's been amazing to see all the different things that people have come up with in such a short period of time. It's hard to keep track of what's going on. It's just not the approach that we have currently taken. But I'm sure some artists will, challenge us to, come up with something to be interactive. I mean, that's kind of what drives it too, right? Is what the artist wants in terms of interactivity.
And so then with Massey Hall, so that's part of an ongoing renovation. There's a whole entertainment complex, right, that's coming together there. So, what are you looking forward to there in terms of video?
For anyone who doesn't know it, prior to the pandemic, prior to closure, which was 2 years ago now, we really didn't have anything there. I mean, it was 1894 build, and we had recently put in a PA system and a lighting system towards the last couple of years of being open. But other than that, there was nothing. So we're going from 0 to 11 here in terms of what we're putting into this place. And so the Coles notes for the venue is that it's really 4 venues inside one complex, and they are all connected to each other from a video and audio perspective, all connected to a video control room as well as an audio control room where we can take control of in-house and brought in cameras and stream or record simultaneously. Use those video assets as backup to provide connectivity between the 2 venues for live event support.
Okay, and so before, when you were doing the 30-minute film series, so that was the same approach as at Thompson Hall, right? You bring in a crew, bring in the gear, take it out when you're done.
Exactly. Every single time, we would bring in, I think those were 10 camera shoots, and we would bring in, bring it all in and take it all out every day. Nothing stayed behind, which is, the way that it's done in a lot of cases, but definitely not the most efficient way to do it, especially for things that, there's shoots that are going to happen that people are going to bring in their own stuff no matter what, and that just is what it is. But, for what we're doing for these sort of series of shows, it makes a lot of sense to have as much in-house as possible, just for efficiency's sake.
And so what's the timetable on that? And has that shifted because of the pandemic?
It hasn't. We were closed for a little while. I mean, we're still looking at some time, hopefully in 2021, being open again, towards the end of 2021. We're certainly, working on it a lot right now. But that's still looking like it's going to happen, but barring another shutdown, but we were shut down for, I think 6 or 8 weeks on the construction side at the beginning of it. And, it put us back a bit, but they've done a really good job coming back. So.
Well, that'll be amazing when it's done. I mean, the phrase "live from Massey Hall" is pretty legendary.
Yeah.
That starts to involve video and streaming. That'll be.
Yeah, and we're really looking at, like, with what we've done at Roy Thompson Hall. Obviously it's very functional and it works great, but the sort of level of that we're taking Massey Hall to is a much higher level in terms of the level of equipment and infrastructure.